Okay, so good evening, everyone, and happy Chinese New Year in advance for those who are celebrating. And because next week we have a break, right?
Yes, Bante. Next week we
Okay,
have a break.
next week break. So wish you all happy Chinese New Year first. Okay, so we are going to start. I think we're halfway through the mindfulness.
Yeah, okay.
Whoever is preparing the slides to kind of set up.
Bante, can you see the slides?
Yes, we can see.
Is that where you stop?
Do you remember where we stopped?
I think it's here.
Okay, what's the
This one?
previous one? Okay, feelings. Okay.
Yes.
So we ended with mindfulness of body and feelings. Yeah, so you can go to the next one. Okay, next one. Okay, so last lesson we covered mindfulness of body and feelings. So body, you have the 6 kinds of mindfulness of the body. Yeah, you have the breath, the 4 postures, all your activities, 4 elements, 32 parts of the body, and you have the 9 stages of bodily decomposition. And feelings, you have 3 kinds of feelings. So the summary of all these things is that whatever you do, you need to be mindful of impermanence. So that's the takeaway. So almost every alternate slide, you'll see this like a chorus, this same repetitive kind of paragraph. And we always talk about always be mindful of this arising and passing. Yeah, this one. So we need to be mindful of arising and passing regardless of what kind of object you are using. All right, so now we talk about mindfulness of mind, which is the previous slide. Yeah, okay. So now we're talking about mind. So in the previous lesson, mindfulness of body would be regardless of your posture, the physical posture, any posture, you can practice mindfulness. And interestingly, how about the mind? The mind also have different emotions, different spatial awareness, different cognitive functions. So regardless of how you want to focus, where you want to focus, you can also practice mindfulness of impermanence. So that is the takeaway. So I'll just briefly read to you these instructions, mindfulness of mind states. So the Pali is Citta Nusati, and Citta means mind, Sati means mindfulness. So you're mindful of your states of mind. Okay, how does a monk remain focused on the mind in and of itself? So a person can just be mindfulness of the mind without mindfulness of feelings, for example. So that's what I mean, mindfulness of the mind in and of itself. And likewise, a person can be just mindful of the body in and of itself. They can just feel whatever meditation object they're doing. If they're doing the 4 elements, they just focus on the 4 elements. They may not necessarily need to be mindful of the mind or the feelings. As long as you're mindful of impermanence. Okay, so then I just read through. There's the case where a monk, when the mind has passion, discerns that the mind has passion. So passion means greed. When the mind is without passion, he discerns the mind is without passion. So you must know whether the mind is in a state of greed or without greed. So normally, greed will stem from feelings. If you have pleasant feelings and you are not mindful enough, you never practice detachment enough, the next step, the next chain reaction, the next thing the mind will do is react with pleasant feeling, with greed, with passion. Anything nice, the color nice, then you have greed, the sound is nice, maybe nice song or whatever, you have greed, nice taste, nice food, you have greed. So that is passion, right? So this is the first pair. And the second pair is aversion or without aversion. So you must know the state of mind, whether it has aversion or without aversion. So aversion is basically anger. So that normally accompanies right after unpleasant feeling, painful feeling. So if you happen to experience any kind of unpleasant feeling through your eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind, then if the mind is unchecked, it will straight away react. It's a natural programming. Will react with aversion. Will react with aversion. Right? So you need to know whether the mind has aversion or without aversion. And the third one, delusion without delusion. So feelings, you have pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feelings. So if a person experiences a neutral feeling, if they do not experience any kind of passion or aversion, then that would be delusion. So delusion would mean you just want to stay or remain with the status quo. You do not want to seek for detachment. So that is a delusion. So a person can remain in a mundane state of mind and have delusion. For example, they wish to, for example, live forever, or they wish to remain in that lifestyle forever. They wish to be free from sickness forever, something like that. So that is a kind of delusion in the mundane sense, in the sensual sense. And if, let's say, a person enters states of concentration, if they enter states of concentration, they experience certain peace or certain pleasant kind of emotions in the concentration, they want it to be there forever. So that is a kind of delusion, a kind of clinging. Actually, I can sit down actually. Yeah. Okay, so that is the three kinds of cravings: greed, anger, and delusion. So we covered emotions, so they are states of mind. So interestingly, feeling and states of mind very different. Sometimes we may classify this in the English language sense, that we classify greed and anger as a kind of feeling. How do you feel? And what's your emotion? I feel upset, I feel angry. So that is a different classification. So for Buddhist classification, we classify anger and greed as mind states, whereas Buddhism, we classify feelings in terms of pleasant or unpleasant or neutral kinds of contact. So that is the first trigger, and the reaction would be either greed, anger, or delusion. So that would be the emotion part. And now we're going to talk about spatial awareness. So we talk about restricted mind or scattered mind. So restricted mind, that means you fixate in a certain area. So that is a restricted mind. You restrict in, let's say you stare at a screen, stare at a phone, look at a book. You fix at one point or a small area or within the confines of the body. So it's a restricted area. So scattered area would be a bit like open awareness. So you let the mind be free, then it's more like a kind of scattered mind. Right? So some people think if the mind scattered means cannot practice meditation really. Or the mind restricted means that is meditation. If you focus on one point, then that is meditation. Actually not true. There are meditation styles, let's say certain Vipassana traditions, which require you to have no meditation object. That means let the mind be open awareness. Open awareness. So let the mind be free. Do not direct the mind anywhere. Do not fixate anywhere. Let the mind be free. So the mind will just run around. But you need to observe how this mind arise and pass away. So that is practicing open awareness. But again, this all meditation objects actually require skill. So if a person has, let's say, they do not have enough skill or they're new to it, then the mind's open. It is also a possibility for them to daydream. Likewise, if a person restricts the mind to one small area, let's say they watch the breath, a person can watch the breath and daydream, also watch the breath and fall asleep also. So that is requires skill. So we'll talk about hindrances later. So restricted or scattered mind. So these are just different spatial awareness, different cognitive functions. And the next one, enlarge or not enlarge. So this one is basically opening your area of attention. You deliberately enlarge the area of attention instead of restricting at one point. You enlarge to a larger area. For example, when let's say we do loving kindness meditation, we wish all beings in all directions well and happy. So that's an enlarged mind. Or is it not enlarged? So for practical functions in daily life, let's say you cross the road, you need to look at the traffic. You need to be aware of your surroundings. So you need to have an enlarged mind. If your mind is always restricted, then you get into trouble. You cross the road, you cannot see you're not aware of the surroundings, you get into trouble. So you need to have different cognitive functions. So these are very real, we call it cognitive day-to-day kind of practical functions. So regardless of whatever spatial awareness you have, you need to be mindful of impermanence. Right? So that is the enlarged, not enlarged function. Then next one is surpass or unsurpassed. So surpass would mean if a person experienced something like a more supramundane state of mind, then you surpass your current level. Right? For example, if a person experiences stream entry or experience a glimpse of the truth, so that will surpass the normal state of mind. So you need to know whether your mind has changed from a mundane mind to a mind who has some kind of detachment. So you need to differentiate. Right? Surpass, unsurpassed, concentrated, not concentrated. Okay, so concentrated would mean, like for example, the different jhanas and the different levels of concentration. We'll talk more on that in future lessons on the faculty on concentration. So interestingly, some people think concentration means you fixate the mind and don't think, which is not true. So even when the mind is concentrated, a person needs to be mindful of impermanence. So this is part of this sutta. And the next one, release or not release. So release can mean different things. Release would mean liberated, and but if let's say you want to refer to this Anapanasati Sutta, release would mean knowing how to let go and enter different levels of concentration. So when the mind is settled down, the mind is unified, then you release the mind, you to enter a different level of concentration. So we'll kind of, if you want to research on this Anapanasati Sutta, probably there's the 12th instruction. There are 16 steps, so there's a 12th step. So the last 4 steps would be reflecting on impermanence and disenchantment and liberation. So released down here may not necessarily mean liberation. So these are the different states of mind. Next slide. Okay, so same chorus and the same repetitive stock formula. In this way, he remains focused internally on the mind in and of itself, or externally on the mind in and of itself, or both internally and externally on the mind in and of itself. They want to look for the next successor, to take over their leadership position. Sometimes you read accounts of them not interviewing the candidate. They never even bother to interview the candidate. They just look at the person only, then, okay, you be my successor. Right? So Sometimes it might be due to this mindfulness of external mind states. It's not because they look at this person, oh yeah, maybe this person it's not phrenology, it's not like, oh, this person have the leadership look, or this person have it's just good looking or whatever. No, right? So it's got to do with mindfulness of external mind state. So a person can know probably just by looking or probably sensing the mind externally, whether they have concentration, no concentration, have they surpassed or not surpassed. And even without interviewing, they kind of know how far is their practice, and they just choose based on that. So you can find this a lot in the suttas also. The Buddha will verify whether the supposed monk is enlightened or not enlightened. So this one is mindful of external mind states. Okay, or he remains focused on the phenomenon of origination with regard to the mind, on the phenomenon of passing away with regard to the mind, or on the phenomenon of origination and passing away with regard to the mind. So this is the key takeaway. The key takeaway is impermanence. So regardless of what kind of emotion, what kind of cognitive function you're doing, what kind of concentration, no concentration, you need to be mindful of impermanence. Or his mindfulness that there is a mind is maintained to the extent of knowledge and remembrance, and he remains independent and sustained by not clinging to anything to the world. This is how a monk remains focused on the mind in and of itself. Right, so the last point here is like the last resort. So you're trying to look for impermanence first, you're trying to detach, until you cannot find any impermanence. Then you still need to be aware, still need to remind yourself that you are practicing this mindfulness of this impermanence of the mind. Because once you do not remind yourself, the next thing is, I cannot detect impermanence already. Then the mind, you just autopilot, just relax. And the next thing is daydream. The mind will drift off, daydream. So this one needs lots of skill, lots of reminder. So that's where the effort comes into play, right? So that's where we talk on the next point on the 5 hindrances. Okay, so we've covered on the states of mind already. So next we have the 4th foundation of mindfulness, which is mental qualities. So Ajahn Thanisaro will translate as mental qualities. The Pali word is Dhammanusati. And this Dhammanusati is not the same as the one we chanted in the opening slide, the 6 qualities of the Dhamma. So that is also another Dhammanusati. If a person mindful of the 6 qualities of the Dhamma, that is also Dhammanusati. Whereas down here, this is also another Dhammanusati. Although it's like, the words are similar, in this particular context, this 4th foundation of mindfulness is just one segment of the 6 qualities of the Dhamma. But if you explore further, it's very intertwined. And one of the 6 qualities of the Dhamma is that it is to be seen here and now without delay. So over here, probably you won't see things like, I need to recall past lives and stuff like that. So this is more like here and now kind of phenomenon. Okay, so there are 5 things in this particular segment. The first one is the 5 hindrances. The second one are the 5 aggregates. The third one is the 6 sense media. The fourth one is 7 factors of awakening. And the 5th one is the 4 noble truths. So this one is pretty heavy. Basically, you can cover everything in Buddhism down here. So especially the last one, 4 noble truths. So why is it arranged in this manner? There is a particular reason. If it's arranged in ascending order, the 5 hindrances would be like the symptoms of suffering. Symptoms of suffering. Then you must know the workings, how does this suffering come about? So that's the 5 clinging aggregates, how it operates through the 6 sense media. And then the 4th one is this learning how to detach, learn how to let go. So if a person apply the Dhamma, they'll experience the 7 factors of awakening. And once they have the 7 factors of awakening, then they will understand the 4 Noble Truths. So it's arranged in this manner. So it's meant to be experiential. So anyway, we just go through in theory, and even while listening, you can also observe the phenomenon. Yeah. Okay. So the next slide. Okay. So there are 5 hindrances. So the first pair of hindrances are sensual desire, greed, and the opposite would be aversion, anger. So that's the first pair. And the second pair would be ill will, sloth and torpor, and restlessness. And the last one would be doubt. Yeah? So these are the 5 hindrances. So I'll just read through the first one. There being sensual desire present within, a monk discerns that there is sensual desire present within me. Or there being no sensual desire present within, he discerns that there is no sensual desire present within me. So the first point talks about identifying the hindrance. So this is very similar to the previous one on the mindfulness of mind states, whether there's passion or no passion. So this one is sensual desire, greed, very similar. Then the second point, he discerns how there is the arising of unarisen sensual desire. So this one is very similar to right effort. So down here, the 4 points covers the 2 right efforts. So right effort in the Noble Eightfold Path is defined as, in previous sessions we talked about right effort. 2 of them talks about dealing with unwholesome states of mind. If there are unwholesome states of mind, try to overcome them. And the second right effort is, if there is no unwholesome states of mind, do not let it arise. And the third right effort would be, if there is no wholesome state of mind, please cultivate them. And the 4th one is, if there is already wholesome states of mind, then you should maintain and perfect them. So in this particular segment, the way to overcome the hindrance is actually the 4 right efforts, but down here they mentioned 2. Yeah? Okay, so the second point, he discerns how there's arising of unarisen sensual desire, so you know how this craving arise. And the third one, he discerns how there is abandoning of sensual desire once it has arisen. So you need the right effort to put it down, how to remove, how to abandon this craving. And the 4th point, and he discerns how there is no future arising of sensual desire that has been abandoned. So this is basically perfecting. Yeah? Do not let this sensual desire arise. So basically the right efforts are being mentioned here. So the same for ill will, sloth and drowsiness, restlessness and anxiety, and uncertainty. So all these are the 5 hindrances. So basically you replace sensual desire with ill will, sloth and drowsiness, restlessness and anxiety, and uncertainty. So these are the 5 hindrances. So again, this is the sutta version, but we talk about long-term solution. Long-term solution. So some people, they meditate and they'll tell you, so I basically cover what are these 5 hindrances first. So sensual desire means greed, which we mentioned earlier. Ill will is aversion, anger, which we explained earlier. Sloth and drowsiness means sluggishness of the mind. So if the mind feels like very tired or not wanting to reflect, not wanting to move, is like there's a lot of inertia, doesn't want to contemplate, very still but not alert, then that is sloth and drowsiness. And the restlessness would be the opposite, the mind running around like a monkey. Worry here, worry there, anxiety, worry. And uncertainty. So uncertainty would be doubt. That would be, whether... So in the long run, the doubt would be doubt whether these teachings are correct or not. The Four Noble Truths is real or not. Yeah? Or whether whatever I'm saying is correct or not. Whatever teachings or whatever instruction the teacher give is correct or not. So this is doubt. Yeah, so there are short-term and long-term solutions for these 5 hindrances. So the long-term solution for most of them would require a person to be like close to enlightened. Like for example, if to overcome ill will and this sensual desire, a person need to be a non-returner. When a person become a non-returner or an arahant, these 2 levels of sainthood, then they have no more ill will and no more sensual desire. So the mind is free from these 2 kind of hindrance. But if a person is not yet enlightened or semi-enlightened, they will still experience ill will and this sensual desire. So the short-term solution given by the so-called commentaries would be to overcome ill will, you need to do loving kindness. Or even the suttas, you need to do loving kindness. But in this particular Satipatthana Sutta, the universal answer is right effort. You have to observe how it arises and how it passes away. So that could be one way. But if you want a more so-called effective counter, or we call it effective temporary countermeasure, so we use loving kindness to overcome ill will. And if you want to overcome sensual desire, we use this meditation called the impurities of the body meditation. So that is covered in last week's lesson on the mindfulness of the body. So if a person is mindful of different parts of the body, they might get disgusted, or they find that, hey, there's no point being attached. Right? So again, need to have balance. If a person do not practice correctly with right view, any kind of meditation object can be dangerous, can go haywire. So I think I talked about it a bit last week. A person overdo the impurities of the body meditation in the Buddha's time, some of them might become suicidal. So loving kindness also the same. You want to overcome ill will and start to wish, instead of wishing all beings well and happy, some instructions or modern meditation manuals that will tell you, first wish yourself well and happy, and then wish your loved ones, and or wish the people that you like well and happy. So you start to think of the person, for example, that you, the gender that you're attracted to. You think of them, and now you fall in love, then become problematic. So instead of overcoming your hindrance, you develop this affection and lust, which is a bit problematic. So the Sutta's version is to straight away wish all beings well and happy. So again, this one requires one to also need to look out for. Okay, then for sloth and torpor, that means sloth and drowsiness, that means a person sleepy, right? There's a range of short-term temporary solutions. So this one can be found in this Chapala Sutta, C-A-P-A-L-A. It's not Chapalang, so it's Chapala Sutta. It's about Venerable Moggallana, the left-hand disciple of the Buddha. Before he got enlightened, before he was an arahant, he was found dozing off in meditation. So when he's sleeping, when he's meditating, his head is nodding, nodding. So the Buddha happened to walk past and gave him some advice. So there's a range of instructions. So the first, starting ascending order, that means starting from subtle kind of method to getting grosser solutions. So the subtle solution first is to avoid paying attention to the sleepy feeling. Down here, right, interestingly, they mention you need to be aware of how these things arise and pass away. But for the case of Venerable Moggallana, or in fact the best is for most people, if you encounter a sleepy feeling, try not to pay attention to the sleepy feeling. Once you pay attention to the sleepy feeling, it's a strong and addictive emotion. Sleepy emotion, very nice. So once you pay attention to it only, it will drag you to dream world. Yeah, so that's the issue. So once you know it's there, try not to pay attention to the sleepy feeling. That means do not pay attention to it. Do not pay heed to the sleepy feeling. In fact, divert or direct your attention to investigate the Dhammas. Investigate on the impermanence of the elements, something else other than the sleepy feeling. So that's the first instruction by the Buddha. So the first thing is to investigate the Dhamma. And if, let's say, you investigate, still can fall asleep, not feel drowsy, then you move on to the second protocol, which is to have a Dhamma talk in your mind. Have a Dhamma discourse, Dhamma discussion, or Dhamma debate in your mind to arouse some energy. That means to have to understand certain meaning of the Dhamma, right? To sort of clear the doubt. And if that still doesn't work, the more you think, the more drained you are, you feel sleepy, then you do chanting. Recollect certain verses, certain teaching, and you keep repeating them. So that's the third protocol. So let's say if you are in a group setting, you meditate halfway, then you start chanting a bit, disturbing to others. So you chant in your mind. Yeah, you chant in your mind. So if, let's say, you chant already, still can fall asleep. You chant already, still very drowsy. Then the next protocol, so for Venerable Moggallana, his unique instruction is to visualize white light. Visualize white light. So you want to visualize white light, you brighten your mind, then you feel a bit of alertness. So in our routine, we don't do that. So I might have mentioned some of the possible dangerous side effects if a person is, not ready for it, karmically not ready, do not have enough wisdom, not enough concentration. They visualize white light for too long, a person may develop this psychic ability, certain divine eye, and they may see things that might traumatize them if they're not ready. So instead of solving the problem, they might get more problems. So not advisable in my class, but if you have other teachers who are experienced, who can guide you, by all means, then you do it. Okay, so that is the next protocol. Visualization of white light. And the next one would be, if that fails, all the mental thing fails, then you get physical. Pull your ear. Pull your ear. Rub your face or wash your face, stuff like that. Then if that still doesn't work, then you do walking meditation. Walking meditation. So you do walking. And if walking still can fall asleep, you walk already still can want to fall asleep. That means that is real physical exhaustion. Then the Buddha said, go lie down mindfully. That means go take a rest. So that is the instruction. So in the previous lesson, I think the previous 2 lessons, we talk about fine-tuning this Venerable Sona, I think, the musician, the monk. He overexerted. He walked until the leg bleeding and stuff like that. So you must know your limit. Yeah? So if you walk, you overdo it, also not good. You need to find your moderation. So if it's time to rest, rest. If time to, how do you call it? If you do not put effort at all, you over rest, also become laziness. So you need to find your own middle ground, yeah, your own moderation. So that's the short-term solution for sloth and drowsiness. And the next one is restlessness. The short-term solution would be getting equanimity. So if a person experiences equanimity, they have the incentive not to chase after these random thoughts. The mind won't run here and there. So there's many approaches to equanimity. So one of the ways to reflect on karma. So in one of our meditation routines, we practice the fourth sublime state on equanimity. We use the reflection of karma. We do not speculate what we've done in the past. In fact, we just observe here and now. Any pleasant sensation that appear, we just label it as good karma's ripening. And if any unpleasant sensation appear, we label it as bad karma's ripening. And if any neutral sensation appearing, we just label it as neutral karma's ripening. So in fact, we don't need to speculate. So we don't guess, we don't speculate. Whatever we've done in the past, it will sure ripen somehow. So if it ripens right now, it has got to do with certain past causes. Yeah? So we don't need to speculate what's going on in the past. We just take note, karma ripening, karma ripening, karma ripening. So the mind will sort of find peace in this karmic kind of ripening, and the mind will reach equanimity. So that is one of the temporary measures to overcome restlessness and anxiety. And in the long-term solution, restlessness can be overcome by becoming an arahant. So if a person is fully enlightened, then they can overcome restlessness. So anything before that, even a stream enterer, a once returner, non-returner, still haven't overcome the defilement of restlessness. So some people come and tell me in meditation, Bante, I'm not suitable for meditation because my mind is like monkey, always run here and there. So I'm saying, if your mind do not run, or rather if you have overcome restlessness, that means you're enlightened. You don't have to even attend any class at all. Right? But the fact that the mind is running here and there, it's very normal. That's part of your normal cognitive functions. In fact, we'll discuss it more later. So this is part of the law of impermanence. Your sense bases, they're working all the time. It's very normal. So the mind run, the whole idea is to always remind ourselves to come back to our meditation focus, our meditation theme, whether is it impermanence, or you're chanting the Buddha's name, or doing loving kindness, whatever it is. Always come back to your meditation theme. So that is the idea. It's not to get caught up, not to feel guilty or feel bad about it, but we know that's a phenomenon. In fact, we call it part of the Dhamma, part of phenomenon. Some people translate this fourth foundation of mindfulness as phenomenon. So this is a natural phenomenon. The mind will surely run around. So this is part of the nature. So the reason why it's called hindrance is because the mind is still caught up by all these 5 things: sensual desire, anger, sloth and torpor, restlessness, and this doubt. So a person who is enlightened, the mind is so-called free from restlessness, they still have the 6 senses. They still need to see, hear, smell, think, taste, and touch. So the mind is still moving, still active. It's not like their mind is forever still. So the difference being an enlightened person, why they overcome restlessness is because they unlock a new mind. They unlock a new kind of consciousness, a kind of mind that doesn't arise and pass away. So basically, they have two kinds of mind operating at the same time. Yeah, so they uncovered or they reached the other shore, and they still have the other shore with them. So in Buddhism, we talk about abandoning the near shore and reaching the other shore. That's the metaphor used in the suttas. So the near shore is basically our 5 aggregates, which we'll talk about it later. And the further shore is the enlightened state of mind. So it's not like a person reach enlightenment and they'll straight away the body disappear. No, right? They have two shores at the same time. Just that after they pass away into parinibbana, the final kind of nibbana, then the current near shore will be gone. So they'll be totally left with the other shore. So that is how they overcome this restlessness, by unlocking this enlightened mind. Okay, then the last one is uncertainty or doubt. So one way to overcome doubt temporarily is to ask questions. Make sure you clear any kind of doubt or try to get answers to overcome the doubt. But the long-term solution is that if a person becomes a stream enterer, right? So we talked about in one of the previous lessons, one of the factors that a stream enterer overcome is doubt. So if a person still haven't experienced the Four Noble Truths, haven't experienced the kind of happiness or peace that is against craving, then they still doubt whether is it real or is it metaphysical, or this teaching, is it real or not. But if they experience it firsthand, they experience detachment, they experience certain kind of inner joy or spiritual joy, then they have no more doubt. Okay, there is such a thing, of spiritual happiness, spiritual peace. So they have no more doubt of this Four Noble Truth. So that's how they overcome doubt. All right, so these are the 5 hindrances. Any questions so far? I think I've seen something in the chat. No? Okay, yeah, then we move on to the next slide. Okay, so this one is the stock formula again, the chorus. So the hindrances, you need to be mindful of how it arises and how it passes away. And like in the previous slide, you need to find the pattern. What causes it to arise? And what causes it to pass away? What causes it to pass away? So interestingly, in this particular sutta in the previous slide, they never give the solution. How to make these 5 hindrances go away. How to abandon it. So the way to abandon it is actually, the answer is here. In the second point, you need to always be mindful of impermanence. Once you detach, once the mind detaches, then that's the way to sort of overcome. Or whatever meditation theme you're using to counter the particular hindrance, if you keep repeating, that itself will also kind of slowly overpower the hindrances. All right, so that is the method. Okay, next slide. Okay, so now we talk about the 5 aggregates. So in fact, I've briefly covered it in the first lesson. So now this is the slide with all the words and the pictures. So the 5 aggregates are actually the 5 things that constitute our experience. So these aggregates is not your PSLE aggregates, not your primary school leaving examination aggregates. Basically, is your 5 components to experience the world. So whatever we see, hear, smell, think, taste, and touch will require these 5 components, these 5 aggregates. So what are the 5? Yeah, so there's a case where a monk discerns there is form, such is its origination, such is disappearance. So in fact, right straight up, it talks about impermanence, right? So you need to be aware of the form. You need to be aware of feeling. There's a second aggregate. The third one is perception. The fourth one is the mental formations. Down here, Ajahn Jeff translate as fabrication. And the fifth one is consciousness. So these are the 5 aggregates. Okay, so how does these 5 things work? So the form is defined as the 4 elements: earth, fire, wind, water. So this is called the form aggregate. And earth, fire, wind, water is basically part of the mindfulness of the body, the 4 elements. So if a person is mindful of the 4 elements, they're actually mindful of the 5 aggregates. If they're mindful of the states of mind, they're also mindful of the 5 aggregates. If they're mindful of the breath, they're also being mindful of the 5 aggregates. Because we need the 5 aggregates to perceive anything. So that is why when the Buddha mentioned, you can be mindful of the feelings in and of itself, or you can be mindful of the body in and of itself, because you cannot escape away from the 5 aggregates. A person may not deliberately contemplate on the 5 aggregates, but unknowingly you need the 5 aggregates to observe the breath, to be mindful of your postures. You need the 5 aggregates. Okay, so I'll cover what's the next one. So the next one is feeling. Feeling is the one we talked about earlier, also mindfulness of feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feelings. And the third one, perception. So basically perception is based on your past memories or your past experiences. You try to cognize this current stimuli or cognize this current contact. So that is perception. Like if you look at the screen, the words, you can read it, right? Because you can perceive the words. Based on your past memories in school, you learned before these words in English words, then you can understand. So there's perception. But if, let's say, somebody doesn't learn English, they look at this, they have no idea. They have a different perception. So in fact, whatever we look, whatever we perceive, everybody have different angles, different perception, because everybody's understanding is different. All right, so that is the third aggregate. And you also need to be mindful of impermanence of perception. All your data that's being processed, that you use to try to understand this thing, is changing all the time. Every time I speak a new word, speak a new phrase, then you process it differently. Every time you think or you try to analyze, you try to contemplate, you might have a different new meaning. So perception is always changing, right? In fact, your memories also not reliable. Your memories is not everybody have a photographic memory. We have like a small percentage of the human race are savants, S-A-V-A-N-T-S. That means they're super mega memory. They're able to recall everything and anything. The exact date, exact second, exact month, they do a certain thing, they can recall. They don't need to recall, they don't have to record in their phone. They don't have to record in their diary. Right? You just, right off the bat in the mind, they can know. So that are a few special individuals. So these are the few special cases. But other than that, most of us, our data will disappear. Can you recall when you were on this particular month, particular date? When you were 5 years old, what were you doing? we can't, most of us can't recall. Right? So this is basically, memory is impermanent. It changes all the time because our brain cells will die. Our brain cells will die, and the memory that stores in that particular drive will be gone. So that is basically the impermanent nature. Okay, so this is perception. And the next one, such are fabrications, mental formations. Every time we generate a new thought, that is basically new formations. That is mental fabrication. There's also verbal fabrications and there's also bodily fabrications. Anytime a new sensation appears in the body, that's a new bodily fabrication, but that is also dependent on the mind. The mind needs to perceive that bodily fabrication. So that is also part of mental fabrication. Okay, then the fifth one, such is consciousness. Such its origination, such its disappearance. So consciousness defined here are the six sense-based consciousness. So that will be linked to the next slide later. But I will just briefly mention first. So consciousness, there's the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. So there are six senses. So if you're aware of what you're seeing, that is your eye consciousness. Your attention to the sight. So that is basically, that's eye consciousness. And if you're paying attention to what you're hearing, that is your ear consciousness. Awareness of the sound, that is ear consciousness. And awareness to the aroma, that's nose consciousness. The taste, that will be your tongue consciousness, so on and so forth. So total, there are six kinds of consciousness. And if you are aware of your thoughts, your worrying or your daydreaming, your thinking, planning, so that is your mind door consciousness. Whatever you visualize, whatever you try to recall, yes, so these are your mind door consciousness. So the whole idea of observing impermanence, or how it functions five together, or how you call it, how does these five things operate together? Earlier on, like we talked, for example, if a person watches the breath, they feel the breath. Even though it is classified as mindfulness as of the body, right? If a person mindfulness of the form, let's say you breathe in and out, there's movement. So the movement is called the wind element. And when breathe in and out, there's also temperature, there's heat. That is called the heat element. And when you breathe in and out, there's also moisture. So that is part of the water element. And there's also the earth element. When you have contact to the skin, or you want to talk about the dust particles, so that is the earth element. Anything hard, any hard and soft sensation. So that's the earth element. So that's the form aggregate. And when you breathe in and out, there's also feelings. You like the sensation, you like the heat, you don't like the heat. You like the fast and slow movement, you don't like the fast and slow movement. So these are feelings. Whether is the breath comfortable, uncomfortable, is it suffocating, not suffocating? So that is feelings. Yeah? Okay, then the third one, perception. When you give a label, you call this the earth element, you call this a long breath, you call this a short breath, you call this a breath. That label itself is part of perception. Any label you give it. Any experience, you like it, you don't like it, what kind of feeling you call it, so that is perception. And every time you generate a thought, that is part of mental formation, that's part of mental fabrications. And the awareness of the breath, that is consciousness. If you are feeling it through your nervous system, you're feeling with the in and out breath, through your nervous system, through the body consciousness, That is your, we call it body consciousness. If let's say you are daydreaming, let's say you watch the breath halfway and start to drift off, then that is your mind or consciousness. You start to imagine things, right? Start to think of what happened in the past, or what are you going to do later on after the lesson. So that is mind or consciousness. So whatever you do, there will be these 5 aggregates. Even if you do not deliberately want to contemplate on it, the 5 aggregates are there, they're operating. So that is why if a person just focus, for example, the body in and of itself, they just focus on the, let's say, the breath, the in and out breath, impermanence of the breath. They learn how to let go of the breath. They're actually learning how to let go of these 5 aggregates. So when a person, let's say they are doing breath meditation, if they are doing a Buddhist meditation, the idea is not to train the breath. The idea is to learn to let go of these 5 clinging aggregates. Because these 5 clinging aggregates is the definition of suffering. And the first noble truth is defined as the 5 clinging aggregates. Why do we perceive birth, aging, sickness, death? Using our 5 aggregates. I feel painful. That is 5 aggregates. Using 5 aggregates is a perception. Separation from loved ones. Using 5 aggregates. When somebody close to you leave you, then you have painful feeling. Right? So that is 5 aggregates. Associating people that you do not like. Also using 5 aggregates. Not getting what you want. New phone, new house, new car, you cannot get it. You feel upset. That is also using 5 aggregates. Right? So the whole idea is not to, whatever meditation object we are doing, we are training to let go of these 5 clinging aggregates to overcome suffering. So when we are watching the breath, we are actually not training the breath. We are actually training the mind to eventually let go of the 5 aggregates. If we are, let's say, meditating on the impurities of the body, we visualize the hair. We are not training the hair to look better. Or we are observing, visualizing the skin. We are not making the skin glow and look better. No. We are learning to let go of these 5 clinging aggregates. Right? So some people say, I use the breath to heal the body. That is another kind of meditation. So there is like Qigong or Prana or Chakra meditation. So it is not really like a Buddhist, 100% Buddhist meditation per se. Sometimes there's syncretism, probably some other kind of belief system. So some people, they combine it. So the ultimate goal in Buddhism is to learn to let go of the 5 aggregates, not to control the elements. There are some traditions where they want to control the heat element, then they want to control the temperature and stuff like that of the body. So that might be a beneficial skill, but the Buddhist sense will be ultimately learn how to let go of the 5 aggregates. Yeah. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the same chorus, same formula, have to observe impermanence to have detachment. Okay, next. So that brings us back to, before I move to the first lesson, I will just cover this one. 6 sense bases. So the 5 aggregates will operate through your 6 internal and external sense media. So internal media will be your organs, external media will be the object, the sense object. So for example, the eye is your internal sense media. The external sense media would be like the screen over here, all the words you see. So that's the external sense media. And how does the 5 aggregates function? Depending on your eye, depending on the forms, then I consciousness arise. So that's the normal formula. Yeah? Depending on your internal organ, depending on the external form, it can be the sound, it can be the taste, it can be whatever it is, then the particular sense door consciousness will arise. Right? So that's the consciousness, you're aware of it, and that relationship itself will be nama rupa, mind matter. You need the mind and you need the matter, you need your organs, you need the external kind of object for this mind to observe. Right? So they are called nama rupa, mind matter. So nama means mind. So these are the four aggregates: feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, and rupa will be the form. Form will be like the four elements. So you need the nama rupa to observe these phenomena. Yeah. Okay. He discerns how there is a rising of an unarisen factor. Okay. So basically, when you have your sense organ, let's say the example here, they discerns the eye, discerns the form, he discerns the factor that arises dependent on both. So factor here would mean clinging, would mean the craving, greed or anger. Greed or anger. So basically this is relating to the hindrance again, to the hindrance. So whatever you see, how does craving arise? From the 9 sides, the words or the pictures or the colors, how does greed or anger arise? And the second point, he discerns how there is the arising of an unarisen factor. So this is, the more you observe how these arise, then there will be a point that before this craving arise, you know. Because hindrance and craving is also impermanent. It's not always there. It's not like the intensity of anger is always there 100% all the time. Or the intensity of greed is there all the time 100%. So there will be like in-between gaps. So you need to observe this unarisen factor before it arises. And the third point, and he discerns how there is the abandoning of this factor once it has arisen. So basically, if a person keeps observing this impermanent nature of these factors, this craving, then eventually a person will have this passion. You get very sick of it, as sian already. And you don't want it anymore. You want to abandon it. So this is the third one. And the fourth one would be, he discerns how there is no future arising of the factor that has been abandoned. So this one requires a lot of maintenance, lots of right effort. Keep on reflecting on impermanence. So some people, when they initially let go for the first time, they think, no more there already. It will come back. So it requires consistent effort. Have to be very vigilant to remind yourself to keep on abandoning, how to detach. So it's basically a tug of war. It's an addiction of contentment. Getting used to a contentment, or addiction to sensual craving, greed and anger. So these are basically the tug of war between the two. All right, next. Okay, so the same thing, mindful impermanence. Okay, so I'll stop the theoretical sharing here for the moment and open the floor to Q&A. Might be too junky and too heavy. Okay, I think there's somebody asking questions already. So can someone read out the question?
Okay, Bante, I'll read the question. Bante, when he discerns there is abandoning of the fetters, does it mean that he must make the effort to abandon, or it naturally goes away? And once contact is gone, fetter is gone.
Yeah, so this one, a person need to always be mindful of impermanence. So regardless of how still, how calm they are, a person always need to be mindful of this impermanence. So you can find this in this, not just in this sutta, in this Silavan Sutta also, S-I-L-A-V-A-N-T. So there's this particular monk is asking Venerable Sariputta. So Venerable Sariputta is the right-hand man of the Buddha, foremost in wisdom. So he asked him, how can an unenlightened person, a normal, ordinary person, practice and become this stream enterer? So this Venerable Sariputta said, you need to contemplate the 5 aggregates as impermanent. He gave a whole list, not just impermanence. Impermanence, suffering, non-self, illusion, poison, arrow, alien, a lot of things. But to be practical, you just be mindful of impermanence. So the monk that's asking Venerable Sariputta asked the second question. Okay, so what if a person already reached this stream entry? How can he practice and reach one's returner? And Venerable Sariputta answered the same thing. Reflect the 5 aggregates as impermanent. And okay, so the monk continued to ask Venerable Sariputta, and how can a person from one's returner upgrade and become a non-returner? Venerable Sariputta said, do the same thing. And how can a person from a non-returner become an arahant, fully enlightened person? And Venerable Sariputta, I think you all have guessed it. Do the same thing. Reflect the 5 aggregates as impermanent. So basically, you just need to do one step, mindful of impermanence. There's not many stages to insight. Just at one stage only, mindful of impermanence. So even after a person is enlightened, Venerable Sariputta also is a very, I think is a very humble person, a very hardworking person, also mindful of impermanence after a person reach this arahanthood. So that is just one step, always mindful of impermanence. So that is part of this right effort and being vigilant, being heedful. So hopefully that answers the question.
Bhante, the question, next question is, hi Bhante, you mentioned passive karmic income last week. Could you elaborate, please?
Okay, so so that particular context would be, most people would believe, have this particular stereotype that practice or meditation means you need to sit down. You need to cross your leg like the Buddha, or cross full lotus or half lotus, and sit down, close your eye. Then it's called meditation. Then you can practice mindfulness. Once you open your eyes, once you start to move around, then cannot practice already. Right? So the real practice would be every moment, standing, sitting, walking, lying down, do all your activities, you still can be mindful, still can contemplate on impermanence. Or even if you do not, or if the mind too scattered, you cannot observe impermanence, then you have our first few lessons when we talk about the faith faculty, conviction faculty. A person can recollect the triple gems in all activities, standing, sitting, walking, lying down. That also is the training. Yeah. Hopefully that answers the question. Anyone else? Live audience or Zoom audience? So this is a chance to clear your doubt. Anybody? Okay, so while waiting for you to generate questions, we revisit the first lesson where we do the finger pointing experiment. So because we've already covered your six sense media, and also we covered the 5 aggregates. So you need to practice, observe how this awareness, different kinds of awareness, how it arises, how it passes away. Like if, let's say, you're looking at the screen, is your consciousness, is your awareness to the screen there all the time, 24/7, every moment? Who find it possible to do it every moment? Whose mind is always running around? Who cannot observe anything at all? No reaction. So this one requires practice. So in order to observe where is your attention, you need some grounding. So the Buddha start off with form. So form is the evidence, the 4 elements. Wherever the 4 elements go, the 5 aggregates will be there. You cannot separate mind matter. Mind matter is together, nama rupa. That's why they hyphen, nama hyphen rupa is together, nama rupa. There's no such thing as I want body only and I do not want mind, or I want mind only and there's no matter. Or in fact, nama rupa is initially translated as mind matter. Then somewhere along the line, some people translate as mind and body, which is very different. Mind. For example, if we look at the screen itself has 4 elements. Agree? But is the screen your body? No, right? The screen is not your body. So you cannot equate nama rupa as mind body. It's mind matter. Because the form, the rupa, is defined as the 4 elements. So 4 elements can be anywhere. Can be inside, can be outside, can be anywhere. So these are the original nama rupa. Original nama rupa. So along the way, somebody will translate as mind body. And once you have a different translation, and people will come up with these 16 steps of vipassana, then different people will interpret differently, and come up with their own different styles based on the 16 steps. So like the initial step will tell you, first must differentiate nama rupa. So initially the translation is differentiate nama rupa. Then somebody will translate differently, say separate nama rupa. So nama rupa is still fine. Then somebody will add a different term, separate mind and body. Now nama rupa become mind and body. So some people will take it literally. You must fly out of your body, like out of body experience. Then it's called separation from mind and body. So some people will do that. So again, the more, people invent more instructions, then the more diverse the different interpretation, then it gets more off tangent. So that's the issue. So in any case, I think there's another question.
Yes, Bante, there are 2 more questions. Bante, can I meditate lying down?
Yes, you can. You can meditate in all postures, standing, sitting, walking, lying down. So for formal sitting, if let's say you come to a particular group session, if you lie down, then it's a bit awkward or sometimes demoralizing for other people. Everybody lie down, then it's like you feel like no energy to practice. But on your own, if you lie down the whole day, then you must see for yourself whether you have any effort to practice or not. But ideally, any posture, if you can still lie down and be mindful or go through a meditation routine or even enter concentration, that means you're quite advanced already. So it's an indicator. All right. So yes, you can lie down and practice.
Okay, next question. Bhante, about the suicide on contemplating the body, Buddha did explain that those are not seeking for next life after they pass on. Is that correct?
Those who are not seeking for, no, not correct. So the particular story that I gave was from the Vesali Sutta, Vesali, Vesali Sutta. So there's this particular group of monks which has certain wrong view. So they heard that the Buddha was promoting these impurities of the body meditation. So they were like, okay, let's go and practice it. So they put so much effort doing it that they forgotten to contemplate on impermanence. So they just like stare at certain part of the body, especially the disgusting parts of the body, and they become like a lot of aversion, because once you have unpleasant feeling, like I mentioned earlier, the mind will, if a person not mindful, will react with aversion. So vice versa, if you see a nice part of the body, you feel it's beautiful, and you do not contemplate correctly, you develop greed or develop lust. Yeah. So vice versa, if a person, let's say, sees certain parts of the body, you find it disgusting or unpleasant, you do not reflect correctly, you develop aversion. So this particular group of monks have so much aversion to the body that they decided to commit suicide. So never in the Buddha's teaching that they promote suicide. So for this group of people, they are practicing wrongly. So when the Buddha came to know about it, he gathered the surviving monks and gave them new instructions. Right.
Bhante, I think Sharon has a question. Sharon,
Okay.
you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Right. Evening, Bhante.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd like to seek your advice. How would you suggest that we can practice impermanence in the workplace? If I understand correctly, for example, with regards to people that we like or dislike there, or even towards tasks that were assigned to us, does it mean that we do not have the strong emotions towards it? So whether you like or dislike, you just see it as it's impermanent and it will pass somehow and new things will come. Am I correct to see it that way?
Yeah, so in theory, yes. In theory, yes. So in practice is also is still quite theory. So the whole idea is try not to get sucked into the mental dramas of the mind. The whole idea of this mindful of impermanence is to get grounded to a certain kind of evidence. Let's say if a person mindfulness of the breathing or mindfulness of the four elements, so that is like a certain evidence to it. But once you lose that meditation object, the mind will drift off to creating stories and dramas. So that stories and dramas is the mini samsara. It's the mini samsara. You get into a character of whatever fantasy it is, and then you go through the birth, aging, sickness, and death of that particular imagination. You go through the suffering of that situation. So the whole idea of the mindfulness, we call it non-clinging, is that you do not cling to that story. Yeah, you come back to, when you think of impermanence, you come back to the particular theme, be it mindfulness of the body, the feeling, the mind, or whatever. All right? So that's why if you're not skillful enough, sometimes you have meditation subject. For example, in my routine, I would say do loving kindness. So if you are working in your workplace, you're mindful of loving kindness, Yeah, you wish all your colleagues well and happy, wish everybody in your workplace well and happy. So that itself, the mind will also change all the time, because you cannot maintain that same intensity of loving kindness all the time. So by trying to practice loving kindness, you are also indirectly aware of impermanence. All right?
Okay. Okay, Ken. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. Okay. How can one liberate and get enlightened when there is no self, no soul? What gets liberated and who gets the rebirth?
Yeah, so this is a very good question. Yeah, so a lot of it has to do with translation issues again. So I think Ajahn Thanisaro loves to talk about this. The Pali word is anatta. Anatta. Atta means the self. The self. Anatta means the opposite of it. So some translators translate as no self or no soul. Atta in a certain religious context may mean the soul. But interestingly, there are like 10 questions that the Buddha avoid answering. 10 metaphysical questions that the Buddha avoid answering. Whether the universe is finite or infinite in terms of dimensions, the space, or the universe has beginning or does it has an end in terms of time. And one of it is whether there's a soul or no soul. The Buddha never answers whether there's a soul or no soul. So you can research yourself. 10 questions that the Buddha kept quiet or the Buddha doesn't want to answer. So with that in mind, then you need to relook at the translation of the term anatta. Is it talking about the soul? In fact, the Buddha is actually deducing the 5 aggregates. How much self is the self? How much you are you in there? The belief or the philosophy of this self is that whatever you have total control, as long as it gives you, if you have total control, that means you have total control of the happiness as well, then that should be considered yourself. So if you analyze the 5 aggregates, for example, the form aggregate, the 4 elements, is it permanent or impermanent? Like for example, the temperature in your body, is it forever the same? The wind element, is it the same? Or the tension in the body, is it always the same? Right, that's the earth element, the tension. Is it always the same? Who say it's the same one? Always the same one? Who say it's changing all the time one? Yeah, it's changing, right? Okay, so if it's changing, so this one is evidential, so it's your own evidence. So if you can observe the first one, very good. Okay, then the second question. Can you rely on it for happiness? Is it satisfactory to cling on to it? For example, can you expect your temperature to be the same forever? In a cold temperature, I want to control it. I want it to stay warm and cozy forever. Can? Yeah, you have no control over it, right? You cannot, it's because it's changing all the time. So sometimes it is dissatisfactory because of its changing nature. Right? So this is the dissatisfactory nature. Because it's changing, it doesn't bring you lasting happiness, then can it be considered your true self? Can it be considered your true self? So that's how we analyze the first aggregate. So second aggregate is also the same thing. Your feelings. The feeling aggregate. Sometimes you hear the sound or you watch the screen, the different people, different pictures. There will be different feelings arise. Sometimes you like the colors, sometimes you don't like the colors, you like the words, you don't like the words. Sometimes you find it neutral. Can you tell your feelings to stay the same? I want to have pleasant feelings all the time. Why do I need to experience unpleasant feeling? Can you have control of your feelings? If feelings are truly self, then why do you torture yourself and make yourself to have unpleasant feeling? You should tell your feeling, I want to have pleasant feelings all the time. Right? Because it doesn't listen to your command, So therefore, feelings cannot be truly self. If it's changing all the time, it cannot be truly self. So on and so forth. So you can go through the different aggregates, the perception aggregate, the same thing. Your memories, are they really reliable? The next moment you forget something again and you perceive it differently. So perception truly self. And the same goes for your mental formations. Every time you generate a new thought, can you tell your thoughts to just think of one thought only, And likewise for consciousness, your attention, your different consciousness. So a lot of meditators have this mistake. They want to calm down the mind. They want to fix their attention to just one place. Don't run around, just fix to one place, which is against the law of impermanence, against the law of these three universal characteristics. Right? If you have total control of your consciousness, then that is your true self. But the fact that your consciousness is always changing, is always moving around, you have no control. Right? So that is whatever is changing, it doesn't bring you happiness, it gives you stress, then that is not the true self. So that's how they deduce the concept of anatta, to let go of this clinging. Whether there's a soul or no soul, the Buddha never answered. Did I answer the question? Are there more to the question?
No, that's the question. No.
Can you further elaborate the
That's
question?
Because it was typed out. The question was just up there. What gets liberated and who gets the rebirth?
Okay, all right. What gets liberated? Who gets liberated? Yeah, in fact, this is some of the questions. Only when a person experiences selflessness, then you can understand. Because now we still come with the paradigm of there's a self, there's an I, then you'll be thinking who gets liberated. So only when a person continues to detach, then you get an answer. Next question.
The next question. How do we use mindfulness to overcome the negative thoughts and feeling about negative comments made on us?
Okay, negative comments. So this has got to do with reacting with the sense stimuli again, your 5 aggregates. Not getting what you want is suffering. Normally we want nice praise. So if you do not get a nice praise, you get criticism or some unpleasant comment, then if we rely on external comment for happiness, then we'll definitely get shaken, we'll get upset. Right? So that's the 5 clinging aggregates. So the whole idea is the same thing, mindful of impermanence. So there are many routes to detachment. We can use the 4 sublime states. There are many meditation objects. You can use the recollection of triple gems, so on and so forth. So there are many ways to have a peace of mind, but ultimately you want to talk about the long-term goal. Eventually, when a person's mind is calm enough, one should be mindful of impermanence. All right? So that is the short answer to that question.
Okay. Next question is, if everything is impermanent, how is Nibbana permanence?
Yeah, very good question. So the Buddha mentioned Nibbana as unconditioned. It's hard to describe. So the Buddha gave an example or analogy of a fish and a turtle. A fish and a turtle. Or fish and a tortoise, sorry. Fish and a tortoise. So the fish and the tortoise were like living in the same pond, and the tortoise is able to climb outside of the pond, climb on land. Whereas the fish is unable, it's just like stuck within the pond. And one day the tortoise crawled out of the land, and the fish was very curious. Hey, how come his friend disappeared? The tortoise disappeared. And he's like, hey, where did he go? So the tortoise eventually came back from land back to the pond. And the fish was so happy. Oh, you have returned. Where do you go to? So the tortoise is trying to explain to the fish, he climbed up on land. So the fish is like, have no idea what is land. So the fish is asking the tortoise, can I still breathe with my gills on land? So the tortoise is like trying to describe, no, you can't. Then the fish is like thinking, can I still swim on land with my fins? And the tortoise is like, no, right? So the fish is trying to use his experience throughout his entire life of living underwater to try to understand what is this land, dry land, right? Which he won't understand, the fish won't understand. So that's the Buddha's analogy. Yeah? So only when a person experiences Nibbana, then a person can understand. So that is why we call it, if a person still haven't experienced a glimpse of Nibbana, they'll still have doubt. Hey, is it true or not? Where got such thing? Only when a person really practice impermanence until they detach and experience a mind that has very peaceful, beyond the sense spheres, beyond the arising and passing of the sense spheres. So that's a glimpse of that state of mind. Right? So then they have an idea of what it is and they'll pursue that path. Okay, so that is regarding Nibbana and the doubt of Nibbana, and whether is it Nibbana permanent or impermanent and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay, next.
Okay. Next question, Bhante, to become detached, is it effective to just keep saying no self, no permanence, etc.?
I would encourage a person to start off with impermanence. There are other reflections such as non-self or emptiness and stuff like that. For more practical kind of observation, impermanence is more useful. Yeah, at least impermanence is evidential. Concepts such as non-self requires some kind of logical thinking before you come up with a conclusion. Likewise, such as the concepts of emptiness and so on. So I would prefer impermanence first, to have a sense of like grounding, and it's easier to detach. And once a person detached, then one can really understand what is non-self in a deeper level. Yeah.
I think Bhante, she's trying to ask, if let's say you want to become detached, is it just keep on saying like impermanence, then does it help?
Yeah, continuously do that. The label is one thing. In the Noble Eightfold Path, that reflection, that labeling of impermanence, that's part of right thought only. Right thought. Then you need the right mindfulness. So the mindfulness is the evidence. Right? Yeah, the evidence. So your repetition there, you keep repeating, so that is called right effort. So you actually need a lot of the Noble Eightfold Path factors together for things to work. So if you just have the label only, impermanence, if you believe in impermanence, you're actually heading to the path of the faith follower. So in the previous lessons, we covered the faith follower, disciple, who never experience it. They do not experience the Dhamma. So you need to have the evidence. You need to experience it. You need to investigate. So having faith in impermanence is one thing, you recite is one thing. You need to observe, you need to investigate. All right? And it will lead to detachment.
Okay. Bhante, the next question. There are people who slander Buddhism and say that Buddhists are practicing to disappear and cease away in this world and become nothing. How do we answer them using the Dhamma?
So again, it's not nothing. That would be nihilism. Again, depends on perception. Depends on perspective and perception. So in Buddhism, it's transcendental. It's the middle way, beyond nothingness and beyond eternalism. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, Bhante mentioned emptiness. Is the Theravada view of emptiness the same as the Mahayana view, whereby every conditioned thing's true nature is empty? Or there is some other ways to understand the Theravada view on emptiness or samyata?
Okay, I believe the Mahayana Sutras have more scriptures on emptiness than Theravada Buddhism. But a few short descriptions of emptiness you can find in the shorter and longer discourses on emptiness, on Shunyata. Chula Shunyata Sutta and the Mahashunyata Sutta. So the way to achieve emptiness is to experience Nibbana. So that's the short answer to it. Yeah.
Okay, one more question. Hi, Bhante, may I ask why when we talk about I or self, it is always associated with control?
I or self. Yeah, because once we have the I inside there, we add the I, the my, the me, the self. Yeah, then there is like possessiveness. Yeah. So that is the whole topic on dependent origination. So earlier on we talked about depending on your sense organs, whatever you, for example, the eye, whatever you see, whatever picture you see on the screen, then eye consciousness arises, right? You're aware of what you're seeing. And because of that eye consciousness, then there is contact of your eye, the form, and the eye consciousness. So once these three things is in contact, then feeling will arise. So in short, to come down, to make it simple, whatever you experience, there will be feelings. So whatever thought process, all the way to feelings, is, I would say, it's a reflex action. You cannot control one, reflex action. But the next step is craving. So craving, because we are not mindful, we react. If any pleasant feeling, we react with greed. Any unpleasant feeling, we react with anger. And that is man-made suffering. Man-made suffering. Because of this greed and anger, we will have clinging. Yeah, after craving, then the next step will be clinging. We will have addiction. Clinging is an addiction. We cling to that emotion. We cling, we have craving. It's an addiction. Addiction to that particular state, that emotion. And that will give rise to a personality, becoming a personality. So that is the I law, the I, the me, the my. So once we have the sense of I am a who, I am a this, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a monk, I'm a Singaporean, I'm a Chinese, I'm a this, I'm a that, then it becomes a becoming. And once there's a becoming, then that particular personality will go through that birth, aging, sickness, and death of that personality. So if let's say you think of, let's say you think of my house, then you experience the birth, aging, sickness, and death of the house. And you start to worry about the house. Anybody lock the door, right? You experience all these sufferings of the house, any insurance of the house, or let's say you think of the body, my body, any Medicare, any insurance, who's paying the bills when I'm sick. So all these are birth, aging, sickness, and death, suffering, clinging, and association of the personality. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, one more. Hi, Bhante. Is cutting down on sense contact a solution to break the 12 links of dependent origination?
Sense contact is not the solution, but is one of the short-term relief. So that is why there is the thing called the 8 precepts. So you avoid contact with entertainment, you avoid contact with certain things. So you prevent getting into more conditions into reacting with greed or anger. Yeah, so these are like the precepts to cut down the contact. But like I mentioned earlier, from the thought process all the way to feeling. So contact is actually before feeling. It's all a reflex action. So we have no way to stop our consciousness from arising from the different sense doors. There's no way to stop it. So there will be contact to the sound, contact to the seeing, contact to your body, to the seat you have. There's no stopping. So all these are natural reflex actions. The only thing that cause the suffering is our reaction. Whether we like it, then we react with greed, or we hate it, then we react with aversion. So the way to overcome it is to apply the Noble Eightfold Path again. So you have the right thoughts of non-greed, thoughts of non-anger. So any kind of reflection that you think, and you need to repeat it, and you need to have the right mindfulness and stuff like that. So you need all the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay?
Okay, Bhante, there's no more question in the chat.
All right. Any other questions from the ground? Yep. I need to repeat in the mic.
During meditation, we contemplate on impermanence nature of Nama and Rupa. And how a meditator can know he attained the Udaya or Jnana?
So I believe you're mentioning one of the steps of the 16 steps of Vipassana.
One of the steps, yeah.
Yeah, I would say the 16 steps would be like over classification, over complication of the thing. The whole idea is always mindful of impermanence. Always mindful of impermanence. However sensitive the mind, because the Buddha mentioned in the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, the discourse of non-self, the second discourse of the Buddha to the first 5 disciples, he mentioned a person needs to be mindful of this impermanent suffering or not self, of your 5 aggregates, internally, externally, near or far, gross or subtle. Gross or subtle. Yeah, so the Buddha never mentioned you have to refine the mind to a certain extent. No, never. So even if a person contemplating on something very gross, not just the hair falling off, like this Arahant Sivali, he can just realize. So eventually, whatever we do, even the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, a person can be mindful of the body in and of itself. He doesn't have to go to the extent of contemplating on the various things of the mind and so on. It's a natural process. If you keep on mindful of impermanence, you get disenchantment. You over time, the more you practice, you get used to the peace, and depends on your right view also. If the person's inclination is towards liberation, then they will want to stay more with the peace. And if their view is not towards escaping, then once sensual happiness come again, they will go to the sensual happiness. Yeah, so it's a tug of war. So it depends on all the Noble Eightfold Path factors, and you need to keep working on it. Okay, all right. Okay, any other questions?
Yes, Bhante, there's one last question. Bhante, is being alone and peaceful better than mixing with friends?
Depends on which stage of practice you are in. If you are already like a spiritually advanced person, you can be contented, then that's fine. There are people who are not spiritually advanced, but they are just being introvert in nature. They have aversion to mixing with people. So that's a different case. So that may not be useful. So a person living on their own, but they still can be very grumpy, still a lot of aversion, still a lot of greed, a lot of craving. So that is not helpful for them also. So ideally, one should have, we say, kalyana mita, spiritual friends. You need peers who are also practicing along the way. And if you can find a spiritual mentor, then that's good for you. Then you can have guidance. And of course, along the way, you cannot, if you, in the Theravada perspective, you don't have to fix to just one particular group. Sometimes, if, let's say, you progress along the way, and let's say those particular spiritual friends are not so motivated, not so much effort, you try to pull them and they still stagnate. Never mind, you find more spiritually advanced friends. It's not that you abandon them, you still keep contact, you still have compassion, but you still seek improvement. So it's a very ongoing, dynamic kind of thing.